I'd actually like to share a couple explicit tips for
Sure.
people who would like to get more into this. Um, the first one is if you're like, I don't know what really to build. Oh, by the way, maybe we give Drew a shout out
Hey,
before I go
Drew.
on my rant here.
How
Hey,
you
Drew.
doing, man? I love how buying old programming books can sometimes yield extra special gems like the previous owner's notes or bookmarks with neat things. Yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
Insights into
totally
how
true.
people think. Yeah.
I love a book that's beat up and scribbled on and got tears in it and everything. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, so the first one I would say is if you're like not sure where to get started, I think a really easy win that's incredibly satisfying is something I'd call hooking up the pipes. So I don't know if you're able to pull a desktop on while we're talking or if it's a pain in the butt.
Nope, I can do it.
Um, Sweet. I'm just like literally like dictating, but there's something called, it's actually been deprecated in the last 3 months, but it's been around for 16 years, maybe longer, called the programmable web. It might be programmableweb.com. You might have to search for it. It's a blue and white page.
Let's see what we can find here.
I first heard this. There's a RubyConf talk from Dan Yoder in 2008 talking about how this website, Programmable Web, had like 800 or 1,000 APIs listed on it. And this was in 2008. It's a directory of,
This
oh,
one?
wow. So that maybe they're really, this might be an announcement about it. I don't know if the site's been pulled down. It's been around for, so
there we go. Maybe this. Nope, that's
oh,
still the same one.
It's
Yeah,
okay
I
if we
think
aren't able to find it, or if you have to go to archive. But it was a really good directory, and I don't know if they have a factor figure on the screen here. But it's a really good directory for what APIs exist in the universe. You might know of some, like Twilio, like sending a
Yep.
text message. I bet there's one for sending a letter, probably. I'm sure. Weather Underground or weather APIs for getting and searching the weather, news APIs for getting the news. And what I just say is like, look at these, and then even if it's like just a silly exercise, think of two or three that you could put together in a cool way for yourself, or even to render for yourself. So an example of one that I'd had is I was interested in doing an experiment. I had someone close to me. Well, I did a talk, so I'll say my wife was having some serious hip issues and hip pain, had to have her hip replaced quite young. But in the months that we are waiting, the surgeon said, it's not just speculation, but like weather changes do affect joint pain. And I think a lot of people I know say that, but we're like, there's nothing we can do. Let's test it. So I integrated with Twilio, sent her a text randomly 5 times a day to rate her pain, hooked into the Weather Underground API, found her location, and took in the barometric pressure reading for months. And we ended up actually finding an interesting correlation for the really bad days. Just the idea was like, could you forecast for people who weren't ever going to get better if Sunday was going to be terrible, so maybe the barbecue is not a good idea, or if Saturday is like 80% likely to be okay, so you can go to the coffee shop with your friends.
Right.
But that's just a few things that I hooked together for fun, like 3 APIs.
Yeah.
If you can do something like that, even just to render things, it's quite fun, right? Like it's kind of an addicting idea.
Yeah. Or find something in your house or your life that you say, boy, it would be cool if I could automate that, and figure out how to automate it.
Yes, I think
guarantee there's an API to automate whatever it is you're thinking about automating somewhere.
Yeah, and that's it. And I always I don't know if you know Jason Sweat. He's done Code with Jason. So there was he and I had this like great debate because I had it in my head that if I could like learn one domain, because like a lot of what Rails solves like are not, they're like micro data, micro users, high impact code and features. So I was like, if I could just learn a domain that needs this automation or assistance, that's how I could like make a good side hustle or side money. So like if I just went here in Northern Ireland and got to know the agriculture community really well and see that they were having to like price fertilizer from 5 markets and it was really annoying, could I have a scraper that saves them thousands of pounds a month? on bulk fertilizer purchases, but I have to learn the domain, like, because these people don't have code. They don't have the code superpower. So if we can go out in the world and learn their needs and their problems, my first job was like that. It was like we were serving national governments. So it's like 130 customers, one particular department with a particular set of needs. And it was too small for IBM to care about, or Microsoft, or whoever.
Yeah.
And we were able to make things really good, right? And I think, so you could do that for yourself, is basically a good one. You can automate. Yeah.
Well, and now with, all the stuff that you've got to, like smart plugs and all that kind of thing, you can do a lot of really cool stuff. In fact, it's something I'm looking at playing with for my streaming, because there's a lot of things now where you can let the audience start taking control of some of your camera and things like that. Got to be a little careful with that, but it's fun stuff to play with, just because it's, hey, I wonder if I can do that. I'll go do it. And that's hobby programming. Now, I'm not going to make any money off of it, most likely, but it's just a fun, different way of thinking. Sudo, what's up? Welcome. Drew says, if there isn't an API, then you've got a possible business idea. That's a fact, my friend. APIs are huge money now. You can figure out how to do one that isn't done.
Yeah, it's totally true. So if you can, early days, I was even just scraping things all the time that didn't have APIs. And there's literally, if I put my business hat on for any of those things, there's something you could have made available to others. And so my second tip, and then I might go into some of the past things I really have done, and maybe some of the things I am doing, if that's of interest to you folks. Okay,
sure.
Because then we can geek out on those.
Yeah.
The second tip is, like you say, not just automation, but doing things for yourself, like building something that you'd want to use. Maybe a certain app that you pay $8 a month for has only about a third of the features that you want. So why don't you build the third of the features for yourself? And it can be ugly. If you're a programmer like me, it can be ugly and very useful, or just copy paste Bootstrap into it.
Right.
Just the CDN, don't even install it properly.
Yeah.
Like, and just be mad and just, deploy it. So that's the other tip is I use things every day that I build for myself. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Studio wants to know what our backgrounds are. Well, I'm a longtime small business web dev and desktop dev for 7 years, however many.
Sorry, I thought you're...
No, go.
Yeah, I was going to say what Colin basically said. I was like, well, it's my office, but the paint's called Scrumptious, and that was going to be my background. So that is the name of the paint. We talked about that before the show. No, I'm a Rubyist. I wrote my, I guess you could say when I didn't have a CS degree. I laid my first line of Ruby in March 2014. So I think my Rubiversary is coming up soon, 10 years next year. I worked for 4 years at a company called Oceans HQ here in the UK, dealing with international shipping bureaus, and worked a few other places, some contracting, which was nice. Worked at Chef Software, and now I work at Shopify on the Ruby and Rails infrastructure chain.
Preston's a professional ballroom dancer, so we have him in here for the color commentary, and that's...
I've got so many balls I'm juggling. I have an identity crisis. So I do consulting and contracting with regard to Ruby and Rails programming, Ruby programming, Ansible, DevOps. I do Postgres. I have a show called Scaling Postgres every week that curates content, and I do consulting for Postgres. And then I'm running my own software as a service web application. So I'm doing all sorts of stuff.
So there you go. That's us in a nutshell. So hobby programming, some more tips.
Yeah. So essentially, just really quickly, it's nice to meet you as well. Thank you for being here. I really like actually seeing everyone and having the commentary. Normally it's like sometimes I can see people, but it's just the audio, or a lot of times I don't see anyone. So it is quite nice being here with you.
Yes.
So very quickly, because I'd love to nerd out about some of the current stuff, and I see that I'm chatting too much. In the past, I was obsessed with bots. So like integrating with Telegram, having users being able to use Telegram. SMS was big. I built a lot of things that I like to use with an SMS interface, because back when 4G was worse, I loved the idea that you could just text something and it would be resilient in more places to work. So I created like an environmental disaster service where like you could get news and weather and searchable news via SMS. So like if the 4G would go down much before. SMS has a lot of properties that it can actually hold up a little longer and not blow up under the load. And if it can't get to a place, it can wait and then eventually get there. And then your server that may hopefully it wasn't blown up can get you the information. So as bots. And then I built a budget app for myself 6 years ago, use that every month, and recently migrated it, which I'll talk to you about in a second. But it's fun, like, oh, I have to go upgrade Ruby from 2.4 to 3.2. Let's go.
Oh,
in
the
I
middle
built
of that
myself,
right now. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a learning app, which is really silly, but it's just a place for me to upload and dump everything, whether it's a link, a URL, a PDF, whatever I buy for myself. Because I never know if it's on Gumroad, some EPUB thing, LeanPub, a PDF, all the digital artifact, or a subscription to a web page, right? So I put all of these things on one dashboard for myself, but even if I have to upload a file. So these are things that give me great joy to use, and it's like just a nice thing to dust off and, one, write the terrible code that you don't get to write at work, and two, suffer for the terrible code later and realize that it's good to write good code. So those are the kind of things I've geeked out on. Before I like go into like trying to nerd snipe you on my current obsessions, is there anything, like, say, Chris, that you like? I know Dragon Ruby recently. Was there ever anything that really tickled your fancy in years past? Or it's okay if the answer is no.
Well, actually, because I was programming in Turbo Pascal, desktop programming in Turbo Pascal, when I learned about Ruby. Somebody introduced me to Ruby, and so that was the thing that really kind of got me lit about programming again, was just going to these Ruby meetups and saying, whoa, holy crap, this is a language that and he was showing me Rails and stuff, and I'm like, I've never seen anything like this before. That was a huge thing. But nowadays, yeah, it's just finding different ways to program, different paradigms to program in.
Yeah.
I would say, in terms of, again, everything's kind of related to my business, and it's just finding ways to automate, but it's not customer facing, and there would be no customer impact. Like an example, like for doing consulting, sometimes I have to log into individual database machines and grep some logs or whatever. Well, I took some time aside, this is my own time, and said, can I do this differently so that I can run one command easily? So it's basically, again, it wasn't programming necessary, but it was really understanding Bash on how to put together what I did to save me minutes every week doing this particular activity. Or it's me saying, I don't want to pay the money for this headless CMS service. I think I got what I need here, and hacking on it to come up with something that, hey, I get a headless CMS and I don't have to pay $150 a month for the service to run the websites. So again, it's not customer facing. If the headless CMS goes down, because I use a static site generator, if the CMS goes down, the websites still run because it just generates the static sites. So those are some things I've hacked on that aren't customer facing, but save me time, save me money, etc.
Well, we've got an example from chat too. So Sudo said one of his friends hacked together this plain text sports site.
Whoa.
Which I think is great. I mean, if you've got a passion for sports and you like programming, mash those two things up and do something cool with that. And it doesn't have to be extraordinarily complicated, but this is really neat that, you can go in here and pull all this stuff together. I'm assuming he's probably using APIs in the background and just hacked it together and did cool things.
That's so cool. That reminds me of a friend of mine who'd never written Ruby, never used GitHub. And on one like day in a Memorial Day weekend, I taught him, set him up on GitHub, pushing it. So I went two birds with one stone, like sending your code up and writing it.
Mm-hmm.
And we would scrape the sports scores on BBC Sports for the soccer football here. And we just sat around and had a couple of drinks, and it would iterate and on an infinite loop. And whenever one of the values changed, it would go goal, and then it would read out the score. And we just sit and listen to it all day because there's normally like 30, 40 football matches going on at once, right? So you can just literally, oh, wow. Oh, they came back. Wow, they were really losing. Ah, cool. Yeah, I think that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Suda.
Yeah, thanks.
If you like this clip and want to watch another one, you can click right here. Or if you want to watch the full video, you can click here.